This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. This week, we host longtime friend and fellow strength and conditioning coach, Raphael Ruiz. A brief review of his resume includes professional athletes from virtually any sports background you can think of. Currently, Raph is tied up coaching a ragtag group of folks headed to Rio. You may know them as the U.S. men's and women's Olympic swim team. As you'll hear, Ruiz is a man's man and a coach's coach. He's direct but respectful, inquisitive but skeptical. This balance helps provide Raph with a reputation that precedes him, and of course the fact that his methods have yielded many amazing athletic performances. In this episode, the conversation meanders through the intricacies of learning and resorting to the optimal posture and position of sport, all the way down to the personality it takes to be an elite performer. Learn what Master Splinter has learned without the painstaking years of trial and error, right here and right now on Power Athlete Radio. This is episode 132.
What's happening, PAN? Welcome to Power Athlete Radio. Hashtag Power Athlete HQ. Hashtag Empower Your Performance. Hashtag K-Man Coffee Co. Hashtag We Don't Fuck Around. Hashtag World Domination. This is Denny. I'm here with John, Luke, and Tex, and we have answered the calling. The forums have been buzzing. We want Raph. We need to hear his voice. What has he been up to? What's going on with Axis? How's he prepping the swim team for Rio? Well, brothers and sisters, ask and you shall receive. Raph, Coach, welcome to Power Athlete
Denny,
Radio.
before we let Raph just unleash the fury, I think that the John Q. public needs to know the type of loyalty that Power Athlete breeds, okay? So Tex has been traveling for 6 straight weeks across the globe, finally has a few days off, travels to Costa Rica for a wedding, and has decided to leave all of his friends at the barside pool so he could come back on Power Athlete Radio.
No. You cannot mistake loyalty for stupidity.
Oh, okay.
No. I have long fucking confused loyalty and stupidity, and this is stupidity, not loyalty.
I didn't know Tex had friends.
I got 5 days. Well, loyalty, this dates back to Katy, Texas, so I owe the boys I'm hanging out with, but I also, Raph gave me that opportunity, so I gotta connect. So I have this notebook. I brought my notes from Axis training from the League of Shadows. And I'm bringing the questions that from the most valuable lectures that I got. So we will go farther than answering the call. So let's take this
before we get going, all I want to know is, Raph, if Tex goes out in the ocean, what percentage chance that he will die? Because I know you tried to kill him numerous times in the swim.
Oh, 99.
99, okay, good. That's what I was
when I met Raph, it was 100. So we've come so far.
Dude, when we were in New Zealand, Tex and I got in the car and did this like they're like, oh, you should drive the coast. And I look and it was like something crazy. It was like 39 kilometers, and I'm like, oh, that's not that far. Little do they know that it's a 2-lane road in through the mountains. So it takes us an hour and a half to get to the coast. So we go out. There's this killer beach. It's some break, and we're kind of walking. I'm like, man, is the water cold? And he's like, no, it feels pretty good. So we strip down. I jump in the water. It's sub-fucking Arctic temperature. It's probably 48, 50 degrees. So we're out there trying to body surf, and thank God it was low tide, because we come to find out that this is the beach where all the tourists drowned, because it is such it was crazy. Waves were breaking. And as they were breaking, waves were coming back up, and a third wave was hitting it. So it was like riptoe. It was like a fucking shore
undertow
wash.
riptide.
Oh, dude, it was it was like an undertow with a riptide, and we went out there body surfed a little bit, and then we got out, and it was pretty cool. But it was definitely New Zealand was a cool spot.
Could you see the fear of God in Tex's eyes?
Well, what I think the one good thing about Tex is he's so hairy that I think that extra body hair insulated him. Whereas if he was a hairless cat, he might have got cold.
Oh, there you go.
There's balance because my bone density, I don't know if you all know this, I'm in the 96th percentile of the world of bone density. That makes me sink, and the hair brings me back up. It's perfect.
Oh, God. It's a little roast on Tex. Good for him.
Yeah. It's good.
All right, Denny, unleash the beast.
Raph, what have you been up to, man?
Oh, I'm trying to change the world. Found a little bit of a break in the action of Axis, and I thought we would just completely throw caution to the wind and get some guys up onto the podium in Rio for 2016. So we packed up and basically are doing a pretty much a year sabbatical up here in the beautiful country of North Carolina, which is really nice, by the way. I would add that this is gorgeous, God's green earth up here. And we're just trying to walk these guys and give them the best opportunity to stand on the podium and listen to the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, you had said that you're at Queen's University.
Yeah, we one of the things that Team Elite is based out of here. We're under the direction of the U.S. Olympic head coach David Marsh, and we use pretty much every venue we can get our hands on here. The majority of our what we call short course work, and that's anything under Olympic distance, we do at Queen's University. A great relationship with this school. That they allow us the use of their weight room and their full facilities and their athletic training facilities and so on and so forth. And then anything else we're picking up as we get closer and closer to Rio. We're picking up all of our long course, which is the Olympic distance 50-meter pull work, and we're trying to get up that eventually, get it up to the 6 and the 7 days a week training sessions over at a couple of other pools within the area. So today we're lucky we get to be at Queen's University, and this is a beautiful institution, Division II.
You know, I remember I remember the CrossFit Football Naperville, the most famous seminar that united like everybody for this world domination, and it was you and John were there, and Ben and Kate, and you. Part of your lecture for that was like the Venn diagram, like the 3 Ps. That whole lecture, and how can you connect some of that knowledge, some of that lecture into what you're doing with these swimmers now? This high of a level of athlete, prepping them for the Olympics.
What's crazy is the common misconception is that they are very good because they are very talented, but it doesn't change our basic fundamentals. You can take 1 million swimmers in the world, and one of them will have a 7-foot wingspan. The rest of us will not, and that is the person that is going to be considered an elite level accomplished swimmer. So it still boils down to the fact that you take anything, and I've been very fortunate to have worked and had the opportunity to work with all arenas of pretty much every sport that I care to work with, including, from our military prep program. It's those guys are the ones that take a gifted athlete or a gifted individual, some capacity of having talent, God-given talent, but you do your fundamentals correctly. And that's what I'm trying to do here is get these guys to understand that 3P model of what you're doing. Let's make sure it is purposeful. Make sure that you have a reason for it. Where, one of the first reasons we walked in here is the coaches said, hey, our guys need to swim stronger. When we're compared to the other swimmers around the world, we don't swim strong. And I said, okay, I completely am on board with that. I said, define that. I said, what would it take for you to consider the athletes to swim stronger? And they said, well, we watch these videos of swimmers in Scandinavia doing, 100-pound pull-ups. And, there's these guys in Romania that are bench pressing 315 for reps. And I'm like, okay, so does that make them a better swimmer? And I said, you need to make sure that what you're asking the athletes to do in terms of putting an excessive amount of volume and stress on these in a sport that's already dominated by overuse injuries, that it is purposeful. And so part of that whole 3P model is we're trying to take to what we consider a pretty archaic, pretty juvenile training system for developing aquatic space athletes.
Well, Raph, I mean, in actuality, there really isn't a strength conditioning program designed for swimmers from a young age. I mean, for the most part, most of these guys were in the pool swimming, and the idea of actually doing some land-based, ground-based, weight room-style training probably didn't come up until maybe in college, and now is only, even slightly more important. So do you think it's maybe like, and I hate to say it, it's not like football where you're 14 years old, you're a freshman in the team, you're following a program, you're lifting weights, and it's indoctrinated into the program, and it's part of what you do for your sport. It seems like swimming is, it doesn't really go down that road.
Completely. I mean, when we look at the evaluation of a swimmer, being strong in the water is really one of the last pieces of the puzzle that we have to get the athletes to do. And like you said, that doesn't play into account until, I mean, when you look at the development and the peaking of a Olympic-based swimmer, 2 quadrillions ago, when 8 years ago, they literally, once you hit 20 years old, you were over the hill. It was time for you to pack up and leave. And now they're starting to understand the weight training, how it really increases injury resistance and increases longevity within your sport. It allows you to push more into an area where you have the probability that you can take that margin of error, all of these factors that contribute to somebody being an awesome swimmer. They can finally gel once you're into your mid-20s, and that's what they're finding, especially with sprinters. You're finding that the sprinters will start peaking at a later age. And so can we use weight training to get an athlete to be able to sustain doing a mode of locomotion that the human body really isn't meant to do? So now we have to figure out a way to strengthen that body to be able to withstand that in a medium that is 800 times denser than air. So every movement you do is resisted, everything that you do is taxed, and coupled with the fact that most people don't want to drown. And I mean, it's really based off of that, and then you put that psychomotor component in it, and you've got a pretty nasty recipe for disaster if somebody isn't prepared for it.
Raph, could you talk about the 5 traits that you're looking for an elite swimmer?
Oh, one of the things we try to figure it out recently. If you guys have been following along, we've got a swimmer here, Ryan Lochte, one of the best swimmers in the world, probably the most known swimmer around the world, right up there with Michael Phelps. And the New York Times came down, and they recently we kind of developed, David Marsh developed a underwater turn for him, because underwater upside down dolphin kick, he is a fish. I mean, if you were to look at him underwater, he is an amazing creature. And New York Times and all these people are coming down trying to study why is a human being that good on an underwater dolphin kick. And we kind of laid out some of the things, and it's really interesting, where number one is talent. It's we talk about presence, what you're blessed with. And an elite level swimmer, like I said, 1 million swimmers in the world, certain swimmers have, for instance, we have some of our female swimmers have measured up to 15 to 18, almost 20 degrees of hyperextension at the knee. And as a ground-based athlete, every one of us as a coach is like, God bless, I don't ever want to touch that. But that is a desired trait within the swimming world.
They call that, obviously a hyperextended knee, but in horse racing, that's actually called back of the knee, and they won't run horses that are back of the knee. And for Raph remembers when I owned racehorses, I actually had a horse that was back of the knee, and I couldn't sell her. So we had to sell her as a pet, and I lost money. So back of the knee is bad, but for swimming, back of the knee is good.
Put that horse in the pool.
Dude, we should have aquatic horses. I could have sold her that. So 20 degrees of hyperextension in the knee.
Yeah, and so one of the things is you look at that, and normally that's something that nobody ever wants, but they're given that ability. A lot of our swimmers have that what's called a swimmer's butt. It's actually one of the things that they like is that anteriorly rotated pelvis, where you kind of have that hip tucked up underneath you. Any power-based athlete, you look at that and you're like, wow, the guy doesn't have an ass, or that girl doesn't have an ass. But within the swimming community, that coupled with a kyphotic curve will give a swimmer that nice, long, flat back that allows them to float their hips in the water. And so you take all of these little things, hypermobile ankles, you take knock-kneed, within the swimming community, you look at that and you're like, wow, that creates a better streamlined position. So just having that, the way that God put you together gives you an advantage that nobody else will have. The other aspect is body positioning. That contributes to better body positioning. As Tex quickly found out and Luke found out, everything is about body positioning in the water. The lower your hips are, the more you're going to struggle and you're going to fight. We have, like I said, we have some of our athletes with great body positioning. When they do their dolphin kick, they create, the hydrodynamics creates these vortices. They're literally turbulent tornadoes of turbulence that are pushing the athlete forward through the water. You either take advantage of that like a elite swimmer does, or you get caught up and drowned in it like your New Zealand experience. But a good swimmer has, whether they know it or not, has the ability to take advantage of those vortices. Entry and exit in and out of the water. One of the tough things for non-aquatic space athletes to understand is, and this goes along the lines of everything that we talked about in developing athletes in developing and protecting posture and positioning. When you watch an elite level swimmer, it's really hard to pick up, but where your hand enters the water, an elite level swimmer's hand will stay there, and they will actually launch their body over that position. So where their hand enters and where they, what's called catching the water, they will catch that water, and then they will use everything to lock that position in, and then all the other musculature will launch them over that hand position. And it's a feeling in the water that a lot of people, you either do it really, really well naturally, or you have to take 30 years to try to develop it. Number 4 is kinesthetic awareness, understanding and feeling water going down the back of your neck, understanding and feeling how it is to swim skinny. That's a huge thing, where you take athletes with these big, broad shoulders. Like if you ever stand next to Michael Phelps, he's got really, really broad shoulders, but when he gets into a streamlined position, he looks like a pencil. So his ability to slightly and very manipulate his joints to get into the skinniest possible position he can possibly do. And then the last piece of the puzzle is power output. And that's the part that we were talking about earlier, is can you get the athletes to produce power in the water through strong connection? So once I catch the water, can I forcibly launch myself over, or do I just kind of flop over top? And that's one of the key components between whether somebody's going to be a decent swimmer or whether somebody's going to be standing in Rio in August.
Are all these things learned? I mean, or is this just something that is just kind of God-given ability? I mean, because what it sounds like is the skill set, and more importantly, the anthropometrical measurements, and just really I guess you could say body makeup of the swimmer is actually the opposite of what we're looking for ground-based athletes. So we probably come across people that are just so awkward that for more importantly for field sports, and we put them in the water. I mean, so I'm just wondering if some of these things are just naturally they just have it or they don't, or is there really a learning curve, or is this something that can be taught?
It's both. It's one of the things that we were referring to earlier. You're never going to develop 20 degrees of hyperextension in your knee, and if you do, you're going to be in the hospital. But what you can do is not allow inflexibilities to be a hindrance to you. The big difference, and this is a reason why I always say every strength and conditioning coach, every performance coach should dive into swimming proverbially, is because everything they do is based off of efficiency. It's no different than working with drag racing cars, boats, high-speed boats, is how can I shave off inefficiencies? How can I reduce the amount of force drag and form drag so that the boat or the car, whatever it is that I'm racing, can go faster? Case in point, we have a swimmer that in a 200 fly, 150 meters, he is the fastest, most powerful swimmer in the world, but because of his inefficiencies through his shoulder, he doesn't have that Michael Phelps-esque flexibility, mobility in his shoulder. He dies. By the time that his energy system can't keep up with the feverish pace, now all of a sudden his shoulders, to get his arms out of the water, his shoulders become so immobile, because we know that mobility is a dynamic principle. Just because you can do it when you're fresh, that's the thing that most athletes forget, is as you get tired, it's getting worse. Your strength is dropping, your speed is dropping, your conditioning is dropping, your pain threshold is starting to drop, and your flexibility is starting to drop with every step that you take. If I'm running a 400 meters, my range of motion is dropping and dropping and dropping. It's the same in swimming. So if he could get his shoulder mobility, what's referred to as reserve, like a Usain Bolt can cruise through all of the prelims because he can jog all the way through. So he has speed reserve. It's the same exact thing with mobility. If his mobility can be at least good enough where he doesn't suck, then there's a really good chance that he can be standing on the podium come Rio. So there's things that you can work on that you don't allow those things to be a hindrance, but and hopefully make up ground on the fact that you don't have hyperextended knees, or you don't have that swimmer's butt, or you don't have, X factor this, X factor that.
So, Raph, in the case of that shoulder mobility or that mobility reserve, is that where you come in and you're working with these guys?
That's exactly where I come in. Is my job is to try to fix things. It's is try to create solutions to problems. As they're watching his pace and as they're watching his stroke count and his volume and his distance per stroke completely alter, because, all of us that have been in the water know that the moment you get tired, the water lets you know. It says, no more, you're done. From that aspect, my job is to try to create a solution. One of the things we found is that a lot of swimmers don't work on, just like all overhead athletes, is T-spine mobility. Is can they get that shoulder blade to articulate around that rib cage and spine without negatively affecting its position, the position of the spine or the rib cage. And so my job is to go in and say, where are we bleeding? Where are the inefficiencies that don't allow somebody to maximize, if not elevate, potential?
So in working with the swim athletes and with, I guess, the elite of the elite.
Elite. Say it together. Elite.
We are
elite.
What do you find that what have you found most shocking that these guys are incapable of doing? Is there a global issue with elite level swimmers or like high level Olympic caliber?
It's the curse of the gifted. It's something that we've been preaching from day one, is the fact that their capacity is so great at all of the variables, and you could take any sport, but you take swimming, for instance, you take all of those things that we just said, their capacity is so high that they could suck at some things and still blow all of us out of the water. And so it's amazing that they don't do the fundamentals, the basic things. They're immobile. They don't stretch as well as they stretch. They don't have that connection within the weight room that says everything that you do in here needs to drive skill acquisition. What has happened over the years, because they're so infantile in their approach to performance training, is the fact that they said, hey, look at these guys Olympic lifting, and look at how much power it develops. We'll put that into a program. and look at these guys that are doing shoulder stuff with volleyball and baseball. We'll put that into our program. And they take all of these things and they shove them in there, but they have yet to have enough maturity within the development of that program to emulsify it, to say, yes, let's get stronger at bench press, but we're going to get stronger at bench press because we need the connection of your right shoulder to your left hip, because that would be good mechanics for a freestyle pull. And that is the part that they're missing. And it's just amazing to me in a world that is so skill driven. It's like training sharpshooters. It's like training archery. Everything that we do in practice is dialed into the infinitesimal fraction of a degree to acquire this. But then we go into the weight room and we're just big Neanderthals and we're just throwing and smashing weights around.
Raph, could you talk about the opportunity that you have right now in that you're right next to a pool? So if you see something within their swimming or a coach ask you to help with skill acquisition, you can apply your tools and then get them in the pool versus other strength and conditioning programs or coaches who they're in the weight room, not next to the field or the pool.
You know, that is huge. That's really people ask the development of the program. It's really based off of that. I spent years standing on a football field listening to coaches scream until they were blue in the face about, Johnny Blow, get your butt down. Well, he can't because we never gave him the tools. We never gave him the mobility. We never gave him the strength down there. We never gave him the leverage capacities. And so the coach is screaming until, again, he's blue in the face. But in the end, the strength coach is the one that failed because we didn't give the position coach an athlete with greater, what we call kinetic creativity. I want to make you move so well that no matter what the coach, no matter how outrageous the coach's demands are, you can accomplish those. And so we have a wonderful benefit of me working with two of the top swimming coaches in the world here between Bob and David. And they say, Raphael, look at that. See how he's not getting his hips high. He's not getting yada, yada, yada. How do we fix that? And immediately we'll pull swimmer A out of the water. I'll do this strengthening exercise. I'll do this stretching exercise. And number one, give them those tools, but more importantly, give them that kinesthetic awareness, because one of the things that we recognize is habits. None of us recognize what our habits are. If I said, hey, your right knee has turned out 12 degrees and your left knee has only turned out 7, you would never know because it's a habit that you developed and you've lost that kinesthetic sense of where it is, its positioning within space. So that's part of my issue. My job is to say, hey, do you feel this? Do you feel that's not in the right position? Once we do that, then it allows the athlete to start to dial in and say, okay, I do feel that. Now I can correct it, because once you know it, that's part of the problem. That's the major part of the problem. Now they know, then they can start to address it themselves.
No, I was just going back to what you said about, the basic idea of knee benders. I mean, for years, and Raph has heard this too, coaches screaming really in, especially offensive line and most positions in football, like the difference maker. And when they cut a guy or they keep a guy, there's always a deal they call he's a knee bender versus a waist bender. And that ability to bend your knees, play with a low center of gravity. And, for years, I always believed that it was something that inherently just knew how to do. And then we figured out that actually it was a learned trait that people have to learn to bend their knees and how to play and not play straight-legged. And it's, I guess it's just like everything. If you can put the model in place and you can get somebody to understand what you want done, and then you can get them to repeat it enough times and then repeat it in, and really just maintain that through all, phases, whether it be in the weight room, on the field, however it is, all of a sudden, hopefully it becomes a habit, and then it becomes the default. But just how many people have the ability to get to that point, I think, becomes the more difficult issue.
Absolutely, and I would like to, the thing that really dials us in here is because of it's such lofty goals that we use the term reserve a lot, is get faster than you think you need to. As we prep track and swimmers, we always tell them you do have to get fast, but you have to get faster than that because you need to be able to tap into something during the finals. And that's the big difference between somebody prepping. When I was at the University of Tampa, we had Olympic qualifiers, and that was different than what we're doing here, because there it's like, yay, we're all happy and we're going to all party because somebody qualified for the trials, even though we knew well that we were never going to make it onto the Olympic team. Versus here, prepping our athletes, it's how do I get you to understand you need to get even faster than you think you can go, because you need to have enough of a reserve so that you can scale back and swim at 90 and 95%, coasting through prelims and semifinals, so that you can turn it on during the finals. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. Most athletes will never grasp that concept.
So, Raph, I think this is an opportune time to get into kind of work capacity versus replication of speed, and then cyclical versus acyclical. So I passed along that article to you, and I'm just curious if a sport like swimming, in which it's just being perfect as possible every single rep, but in the same movement, versus a field sport, how has that changed your how does your approach to these two different athletes changed? And I'm just kind of curious there.
What's interesting, when we looked at, I literally, when I knew I was diving into this, I had to go back and revisit a lot of the lecture, a lot of my old notes in developing sprinters. One of the things that we looked at was something that makes a field sport completely different than cyclical sport is what's called central pattern generators. And what that is basically oscillating neurons. You get a certain pattern that becomes cyclical, not necessarily the shape of a circle, but a constant continuous pattern where there's not stopping and starting. Then that mechanism can almost run on its own. There doesn't have to be a reactionary force there. It just has to be step over, step over, step over, step over, or pull through the water, pull through the water, pull through the water, where your shoulders are just constantly turning like a wheel kind of issue. And so that becomes a completely different metabolic demand, where a field sport is truly ATP. Even if you do start to play into that anaerobic threshold, where the speed is something that you can't maintain, when you start working with central pattern generators, you can just really dial into the contractibility of a tendon and just get that motor unit to fire, so that all of the motor units are firing cohesively, and it almost becomes autonomic for the athlete to swim, where they can just turn their brain off and just type in run, hit play, and then they go.
With sprinters, do you ask them to just turn it off and go, or do you want them aware? Do you kind of or I don't know if Marsh teaches like the speed reserve, in which you have something a little left in the tank to just kick it in at the end?
Both. During training, we spend a lot of time with minutia details of getting an athlete to dial into what we're trying to teach them, but all the while we're layering in a psychomotor response that we want them to understand during the race. So, for instance, going back and forth between two drills, they could do weighted pulleys, and we really want them to work on a catch position. So once your hand enters the water, it kind of drops down to about top of the head height, and for a swimmer, that's really your power phase. Once a swimmer catches water with their forearm there, that's when they're really taught to drive and really pull the water past them. And so whatever coaching cue we come up for that, where we say, thump and pull, thump and pull, thump and pull, but eventually we just want that to carry over into torpedo. Or if somebody has a specific emotional cue to swimming fast, we try to dial that back in, so that emotional response is the only thing that we're prepping them for when they race.
So during our pre-show talk, you talked just a lot about essentially swimming sparring partners and driving that competition against another person. So is this kind of what you're trying to accomplish with that?
Absolutely. It's anybody who's had the pleasure of working with swimmers will know it's really within that arena that they compete, and they just love to compete. And it's a win-lose for swim coach for swim strength and conditioning coaches, because imagine you're getting the best of what what high-level athletes offer, but you're also getting the worst in terms of the way they're built and the orthopedic considerations. But you're getting athletes with unbelievable VO2 maxes and high pain thresholds, and athletes that know and want to compete. So today, like they're squatting today, and they're doing 4x4s. So they just want to get in there and throw 300 pounds on the bar and just go, when there should be some sort of systems that's kind of work up towards that. But all they know is, I'm going to go hard, I'm going to go fast, and I don't know anything else outside of that. So we try to educate them on that principle, but control that animal as much as we can.
All right, so just kind of going back to when Tech started bringing up like the cyclical and acyclical, I thought of a few episodes ago we had Rob Miller on, and he's like OG CrossFit, rock climbing, and he had like an article he put out years ago, and he developed what he called a map of athletic performance. Are you familiar with that at all, Raph?
No, I'm not.
Bullseye. Well, it kind of looks like a bullseye, and on.
Danny, let me explain it a little bit. Rob Miller's like one of the top long distance climbers in the world, like 3 weeks on a face of El Capitan type deal, and he got into CrossFit. He was from Santa Cruz, and somebody brought him in, and he had this idea that if he, increased work capacity should translate over to his sport. And when he saw that the CrossFit was actually negatively affecting his ability to climb, he had this kind of come to Jesus moment realization and realized that this isn't what he thought it was. So he pulled back away and he created this map of athletic development. And, and he had his repetitive versus non-repetitive sports, Olympic weightlifting, strongman was kind of another one. I mean, sports
right.
The training basically is repetitive movement versus non-repetitive things like football, rugby, soccer, where you can practice for them, but but once you get into the fight, you never know what's truly going to happen. So he, basically created this whole deal, and as you got closer to the center, it all of a sudden became, more focused within that. And his contention was that just basic barbell training in conjunction with training for your sport was actually the hands down the best thing you could do. And he actually found that in actually getting stronger and increasing barbell work and just some basic, primal type movements, coupled with actually training his sport in both long and short distances, doing like explosive type stuff like bouldering versus long distance climbing, that actually the mix of short and long with barbell training was actually the perfect recipe for his sport. So that's right. a little background on him.
And John, if you remember, it was like you started at the center as a beginner, and as you worked out, you worked towards the elite.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and I kind of got like he talked about those things that you said, like the barbell stuff, but it was also about like training at like a high intensity. Well, remember, it was like anything at 70%. Like if you get caught up in like 70% of an intensity, he called that like garbage time. So when I heard Raph explaining that, I was like, I wonder how much time do these swimmers spend in the water racing at like what would be high intensity, and how much time is it like 50% or less? Well, possible.
Denny, I think we were thinking a little bit about like the Charlie Francis stuff, where it was you're either moving faster than 92% or you're going at under 75. So there's either active recovery or peak type of stuff, and he called that the no man's land. And that was similar to what Rob Miller found out, that like either you're doing some form of active recovery work or moving at this movement, or you got to go max intensity, that there was a kind of a no man's land, which is ironic, seeing as that most strength training is done within like a 75 to 85% level. So what we realized, and this was always a question I would have loved to ask Charlie Francis, was you always talk about this no man's land and the ability, like, you got to run fast to get fast, but yet if the most strength development is really built within that no man's land. So I think what he's asking, Raph, is like, when you guys are in the water, is there is it similar to sprint stuff where, hey, I need you to swim this at 90+% of your fastest time, or like are they always going balls to the wall? Is it kind of a max effort type deal?
Right.
For the most part, really what we try to do is, again, based off of kinesthetic awareness, a drill that if you take any swim stroke and you break that down into X amount of components, they try to come up with as many drills as possible to get an athlete to feel the water. And then once they feel that, they integrate that into race pacing. So it's go hard, go fast. One of the things that we always use here is it's either on or off. Whatever your dominant, what's called your prime stroke. So if you're a medal contender for the 200 free, then whenever you're swimming the free, you are swimming at your race pace. You're going breakneck speed, and I'm gonna find really awesome thing. They have this thing called Lanes here. In conjunction with finding good sparring partners to swim against. They have this guy developed a series of lights that are on the bottom of the pool, and you could dial and program whatever it is that you want. So if you wanted to race against the world record pace, you just plug it into the computer, and then you swim against this light that is just bouncing back and forth on the bottom of the pool like Pong. So everything is really based off of, if you are doing your prime stroke, you are trying to race, or you're trying to train at a certain pace.
So with that pace, is it is it like the sprint stuff where, hey, I need you to run with or swim within 95% of your best time, or every time you're getting in the water it's a fucking balls out?
No, it's normally within that 95 balls out kind of. It's not always balls out. It's not always 95. It's depending on what they want to accomplish. That, I mean, we do a lot with lactate threshold here. That's a big difference between the swimming community versus other sports. The 50 is the shortest thing that they do here, and that thing is 23 seconds, which would equate to a 200-meter dash within the track and field world, which is speed endurance. Once you start getting to lactate threshold at 200-meter dip, so anything after that becomes highly irregular. And one of the most amazing things, which most people don't recognize about swimming, if you get a chance, look up Katie Ledecky, who this past World Championships, she did something that is pretty absolutely amazing in terms of superhuman, and she ended up winning every freestyle event from the 200-meter on up, which is basically unheard of. It literally would be like Usain Bolt winning the 200, the 400, the 800, and the mile, all at Rio, and this woman did that, and it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to accomplish something like that. It's probably something that may never ever be done ever again.
With the so obviously, like they bang out their first time, or they do their first swim, they swim within 95. Obviously a smoker, they get done. Then take us through, is there a active recovery swim? Do they do something to clear lactate? Are they testing lactate levels? I mean, what do they do for or is there some form of active recovery to get them ready for another swim?
Absolutely. Everything is based off of those cycles, just like you said. If we're doing lactate threshold, everything from finger pricks, basic rate of perceived exertion, heart rate. We do a lot of heart rate variability testing, where as soon as they get out, take your heart rate, measure your heart rate. Once that thing drops back down to 130 beats, then immediately start your next set kind of issue. So, but a lot of it really is based off of that skill acquisition. So it goes back to drilling. You might go back to a easy streamlined drill of finding that catch position, nice and smooth, nice and easy. Do a couple of rounds of that, and then get back to your integrative race pacing.
Is there anything that you've come across, or anything that you've observed that we could incorporate into our training in the weight room and more of our ground-based stuff in terms of that lactic acid threshold type stuff?
The thing that's the hardest, which, obviously being a sadist, you're going to want to try, but we do a lot with breath holds. And the ability, when you swim a 50 free, which sounds completely ridiculous for non-swimmers, but they're swimming a 50 free and they do no breath. And when you watch the Olympics, those guys will swim across the pool and they're literally breakneck speed, trying to swim away from a shark, splash and dash kind of issue, and they're holding their breath. So a lot of what we do is based off of that principle is, can you maintain composure? Can you still perform in that high lactate threshold environment and holding your breath? That is one of the fastest ways to drive your lactate up. You just have to be careful, because people will pass out.
So, I'm thinking maybe we try, I don't know, let's put 315 on the bar, max rep back squats while holding your breath.
Yes.
Sounds badass.
No. With occlusion training.
With the
So what we do is we put knee wraps high in the groins. We'll occlude the top of the quad.
I'm
315. And here's the deal.
You got to handcuff yourself to the bar.
No. You have to fucking put on a belt. So you take a big breath, you push out the belly, and you hold it, and you have the belt on occlusion training 315 max rep squat.
Is there weight? Is there weight on the belt?
Oh, good idea.
No.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, that would be crazy. But it's actually that belt that you wear, Tex, with the massive 25-pound belt buckle. So it could be weight. The one that you can block bullets like fucking Wonder Woman with her fucking wristbands.
Well, I often wear my boots / Olympic lifting shoes all over the place.
So, Tex, now that you're down in Costa Rica, are you wearing that belt buckle and boots with your shorts, like your board shorts?
No, I'm still rocking the jeans, but now I just don't have a shirt on.
And I think maybe it's a disclaimer is we were just kidding about that back squat while holding your breath. Does our listeners need to know?
No, you were.
We might
be able to factor that.
Yeah, we're gonna try. We'll try. It might find its way into a program.
And if we make it next week, we'll let you know how it went.
Raph, we've been so I was going back and looking at some old programming stuff, and I had done some of the inclusion training, and I was just kind of reading up about it, and then Tom Incledon, he sent me this whole research study about occlusion. So I was like, oh, let's give it a try. So we've been using some occlusion for the top of the quads, the calves, and the biceps. And the comments from people about it are so hilarious. Oh my God, I've had 4 days of DOMs, all this problem. I'm like, you guys, it's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, in terms of just muscle building, hypertrophy, and driving cytokines and a lot of different stuff. So that's where the joke has been going around about trying to include everything. So yeah, it's all good. But is there and I always wonder this, especially we're working at the levels that you have. Was there anything surprising, or more importantly, amazing, disconcerting? Because I always think looking from the inside. I mean, think about how many strength coaches we run into that their dream is to be an NFL strength coach, and if they ever get there, they're going to be so disappointed by what they saw. You standing on the outside, now you're there, you kind of wow, this isn't what I really thought, or this is better than I thought, or is there anything that you've really just kind of opened your eyes or kind of changed a little bit, or changed your mindset a little?
I think the only thing that really changes for me, and that's really more dialing into athlete management, and that's the one thing that if you're not used to working with athletes at a high level, dealing with, just imagine programming for the local class that you have in your gym. Now all of a sudden, right now, I've got guys that are in the heat of a pretty nasty cycle, and I've got one guy that has a photo shoot in LA. Then I have another guy that's going to the swimming awards, or there's 3 that are going to the swimming awards in LA this weekend. I've got 2 that are competing in Italy. So it's the tough part is managing those high level schedules and dealing with a lot of athletes that relatively young and as a professional sport, but they want that same. They want to be. They want what football has. They want that the fame that pro basketball and pro baseball have. But but really isn't a ton of money in it. We're fortunate. We have a couple of athletes that make a crap ton of money from swimming, more than the average human being will ever make. But for the most part, it's human management, and from a training aspect is dialing into, like what I said, is the psychomotor control, is getting the athletes to understand the emotion that you train at, that you do a set, that you do an exercise, that you acquire skill at, of getting that to tie into their racing. And that's the hard part of getting of managing that athlete from training him in the weight room and getting them to perform in the arena.
Raph, give us a day in the life of, now that I would imagine that the training and the practices are quite demanding at times for a lot of these athletes. What does your day look like?
Oh God. I get up really early and I get in all of my readings, as many readings as I can get in before I have to hit the road. We actually do a military prep program here at a local gym. So a friend of mine actually runs a facility up here that he preps guys, current operators and young athletes that aspire to be, the next Navy SEAL or Marine Recon, so on and so forth. So we try to get them into that selection phase. And then if I have an opportunity, I try to get in a workout depending on what day it is. And then the sprinters lift in the morning because those are our big boys. We want to take advantage of all, the testosterone and the growth hormone flowing through their system in the morning. And we want to try to keep those guys out of the water a lot more than the middle distance guys. So we'll put those guys through their lift, and then I'll send them over to the pool. If the middle distance guys aren't lifting immediately, then I go to the pool and we do in water what we call dry land ASAP, accelerated skill acquisition programming. And I'll do some of that, and then the middle distance, they will lift, and then we'll take a break, and we do double days. So we give them a small break. We'll have coaches meetings. We'll go over film. We'll watch the guys' biomechanical analysis, figure out who's sucking at what, and we try to find solutions for that. And then in the afternoon, the team will come together on normal basis. We'll do dry land activation, which is corrective exercises, manual resistance, shin, T-spine mobility, a lot of manual resistance work, accentuated negative yielding isometric work, so that they can develop the ability to protect certain positions, and then swim practice, and then go home. Sometimes I have to throw in a pickup raider from daycare, get in the water with some guys once in a while, but that's a typical day in the life of Raphael.
No rest.
Well, no rest for the wicked.
Yeah.
Well, and those of you guys, when he was talking about earlier about readings, Raph actually works as a psychic, so he has to have 4 or 5 people come in. He usually reads some tarot cards and a couple palms. So don't be confused. I mean, he's big into the future. He's big into astrology.
I don't know. Ask Raph.
Well,
astrology.
Yeah, astrology. He's like, the moon and the stars are lined up. Today's a good day to back squat. So yeah, it's just reading.
So that's how he does his program.
Oh yeah, it's totally based on lunar cycles. Lunar cycles.
You know what's funny, and we talk about this. Everybody wants the latest and greatest high tech thing, and with all professional athletes and with all athletes, everybody wants the latest and greatest. And you asked earlier what's something that's eye opening and shocking, where all of a sudden they're concerned about buying $10,000 gloves and boots that are, battery packed to keep their hands and feet warm because the ready rooms are cold, when in fact there's a lot of other things that we can probably address that would cause a significant more increase in performance than cold hands and cold feet. So there's little things like that where they want the sexiness of what do the Carolina Panthers get access to, versus, hey, you know what, let's just go to Sports Authority and buy some hand warmers and then close the book on that one.
Raph, I was down there for some of the deloading week and an off week, and you were telling me you were taking them down the lake, you were taken to a field to play some games. Could you talk about some of the stuff you do to keep training interesting for these guys whose life is training?
Oh my God! You know what? The crazy thing is, we, especially over the summer, we spend as much time trying to come up with as many options to keep them active and keep them out of a chlorinated pool. And we do everything from, I took the guys and we taught them, Filipino combat systems one day, taught them knife and stick work. We taught them Muay Thai. We took them paddle boarding. We let them play around in the lake. Around here, there's great hiking. So we took them hiking, horseback riding, anything and everything that we can do to, and John, you can attest to this. It's more management to keep them out of trouble. You let some guys with too much free time on their hands, and next thing you know, they're finagling over to somewhere where they shouldn't be, or they're spending money where they don't need to be spending money. And next thing you know, we have bigger issues. So aside from the active warm-up or the active recovery, we also do it as a people management service to make sure that, we develop that team aspect and keep them out of trouble.
So what you're saying is that if you give a bunch of young professional athletes too much time on their hands, they will find a way to get into trouble.
Absolutely.
It's weird because I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not young, and I still get into trouble.
And did you hear Rob's dig? He's like, John can attest to this. Well, yeah, it's because Raph and I were young one day, and we used to get into trouble.
No, I suddenly had the image of that the scene in Armageddon where they had like the last night to go out in the town before they were going to get launched to the asteroid, and they're all in the trucks. They're like, woo!
Dude, what was so cool about the training with Raph is it was so unconventional in terms of strength conditioning. Like I had never, it's always like, hey, you're gonna take this bar, you're gonna do this, you're gonna, pull through range of motion. We started with isometric holds, which is, where you basically develop stability in the joints, which was something I was never taught. I mean, we and I remember, talking with Raph, and Raph always had a pretty solid intern program, and so, being part of my job was to not only abuse the young interns, but was to get them to quit. As 100%, like it was fucking awesome. Rob's like, hey, get this guy to quit. I'm like, watch this. I go over there, like, wipe my face all over the guy's shirt and be like, oh, I need a towel. Let me get your shirt. And fucking leave. But like, some of the early stuff, and I know Rob's like evolved, but not past where we were. I mean, it was basically the same stuff we talk about today. Like, if you can't show me stability with a straight arm, how am I going to expect you to bend or bend the joints? Like, motion. Yeah, I mean, if you can't stand erect with a heavy bar on your back in a good stable position and show me, good trunk stability, quad, I mean, basically being able to maintain a straight line with a bar on your back, how am I going to ask you to sit below parallel and stand back up? I mean, same thing with, even a push-up. If you can't get yourself into a pike position and just hold that position, are you really orthopedically sound? Do you have the musculature, the stability, the strength to basically be able to bend and do a push-up? And that was something that nobody had ever expressed to me, and I didn't even understand. And all of a sudden, like, he presents that to me, and I'm like, wow.
Probably more so like people can't do that, and then you fucking open a gym and realize everybody who
that was another fucking huge mind fuck. And what was nice with Raph is Raph played college football and worked with high level athletes, and so we were in a sense elitist in that we trained. Raph's training group was all like high level people. I mean, we had a bunch of NFL guys, and so everybody was at a very, very high level. And even Raph's personal clients, Bill Stoltzen, God rest his soul, who trained with Raph for years, were really fucking great. Like Bill, who was one of Raph's normal clients, was like a business guy. He was phenomenal, dude. He would show up and train in our groups, and if new guys were there, we would give him Bill as a partner, and they're like, who's this fucking old man or this business guy? And Bill would fucking crush him. And it was because the system had worked, and it was this idea of progression and stability and strength, and it was something that I remember training with Raph, especially in those older early days, and remembering being like, fuck, I wish I had this years ago, and to basically be able to develop it. And I remember we had trained together for a bunch of years, but I remember like a couple years later, I'm like, hey, how come we don't do that stuff anymore? And Raph's like, well, why would you want to do beginner stuff? Like, that was the beginner stuff. Like, now we've progressed into new stuff. Like, the new guys do that. Like, there has to be progression. You can't constantly go back and drink from the same well. And I think like that to me was really good. And then when I retired and actually opened the gym, I realized that for a lot of people, they never get out of the beginner stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
and
what
that was kind of the Tom.
Well,
who were we just talking about? About the map of.
Oh yeah, well, the athletic performance, the Rob Miller
Rob
deal, and I think that was the hardest thing for me. And I remember Raph too. As we we traveled for fucking many seminars and used to talk about this. Is that there was this idea of like, hey, as a beginner, and then you progress into this finite point of expert, I guess you could say, like this elite. I fucking hate using the word elite, but this elite kind of
initiated.
We said it a lot.
It's kind of like like all of a sudden it becomes like the distance between like a spotlight and like a fucking laser beam.
Mm-hmm.
And over that time, the training becomes more and more refined, and you develop all of these skills, and it kind of ends up pinpointing. And what I realized is owning a commercial gym and going around and working with people, I realized that 99.9% of the world will never really get out of that beginner stage. And so I think, for us especially, like coming in and working with people still like 2 or 3 years later, that we're still struggling to do things that we were like, wait a minute, we already taught this. Like, why can't you still do it? And I think like as a, for a guy like Raph especially, you have to, be able to work with athletes that are able to, like if Raph's over there teaching these guys fucking how to do a dead bug in year 2, he's probably going to fucking kill himself and kill them.
Tragic loss for the
I've seen it.
swim team.
No, I know, Raph. I mean, dude, we had to do it. It's part of the reason I had to get out of owning a commercial gym, because I was either going to kill myself or kill all of them. And it just becomes that deal. So, I mean, for a guy like Raph, you have to go and work with people that are the best in the world, that can basically be able to take your information, and the fact that he can work with coaches and be like, hey, pull this guy out, let's do this, let's work on this, put him back in the water and see improvement, is the difference between Raph having a smile on his face and Raph fucking killing people.
Raph, did you have to earn the trust of the coaches, or were everybody pretty receptive when you jumped on?
Well, the coaches, I've been working with David Marsh for about since 2010. So we've had a great relationship prepping the guys for the last Olympics, but it's been an ongoing fight, because there's, when you have guys with gold medals, there's egos involved where, and especially me coming from a background where I'm not a competitive swimmer. I never put a Speedo on and trained high school or college swimming. And it's really interesting where you have that, again, an adolescent approach, an adolescent system where, what does this guy know? I have a gold medal. What does he know and what can he teach me that I don't already know? And it's been an interesting, journey where, you just have to wait. You have to wait till somebody says, until you notice a frustrated look on their face, or when you say, hey, how come I can't lift as much as that guy, or David keeps yelling at me for this, how come I can't do that, or hey, Raphael, I'm having pain in my shoulder, and then all of a sudden that is an open door invitation for you to say, okay, well, that's happening because these 3 things, and it's if you know your basic fundamentals in terms of physiology and biomechanics, it doesn't take much to help somebody out, because like I said, they're the same as anybody else. They just happen to be, I've got a guy that's 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan. And so he's going to have the same problems as you or I, just the fact that he swims at it, he's a Ferrari in the water.
I got one more. So, Raph, one of the most valuable things I took away was essentially being a minimalist as a coach. You don't need anything to still have an impact and success with your team or your athlete. And then I recall one of the stories you talked about with University of Tampa, how they didn't have the resources or give you the resources. Could you talk about that process and how that helped you as a coach just kind of evolve your philosophy or develop your abilities?
It's one of the biggest blessings that I ever had, and I always laugh, and John, we've been around the block for a while now. Whenever you see really nice facilities, all I could think into my head is, number one is we're all the same, and we look at a shiny new package and we go, wow, this is a nice facility. You walk into University of Oregon, you're like, this is amazing. Or you walk into any of the top tier programs or top facilities in the world, and you'll say this is a nice program. But I immediately go to my humble developments, and I always say, I almost feel sorry for you because I didn't have anything at the University of Tampa. It forced me to say, this is what I understand about physiology and anatomy and biomechanics and sports psychology. How can I get my athletes to do what I need them to do without anything? And a lot of the accentuated negative, the manual resistance, and the yielding isometric work really was born out of necessity because I didn't have any equipment. I mean, John says it best. I'm sitting there, I'm looking into this storage shack underneath the old bleachers, and all I can think is, I've got Deion Sanders coming here in 3 weeks. I don't have shit for equipment. How am I going to get him to do what he needs to do and not look like an absolute idiot doing it? And so it really, a lot of the things were born out of that, of saying, okay, Raphael, you really have to dial in your anatomy, figure out what we want to train, figure out what we want to accomplish, and then start to do that. I mean, anybody out there can remember that time where you lost a squat because you lost positioning. And we all can go back and say, it might have been yesterday, it might have been a long time ago, but I remember sitting there in college and I go, you know what, my torso fell forward, the bar rolled forward, and I ended up doing this front flip somersault, felt like an idiot. And I remember sitting there going through and saying, listen, the natural way that the body learns is it takes what it already knows and it develops a feed-forward feedback system. And your body says, is this what you're supposed to be doing? When I get to the bottom of my squat, my step up, my lunge, is this what it's supposed to feel like? If not, my body will start this loop that says, okay, adjust this, move this, turn this, twist this, until I can try to get into that position. And then I found it was my job was to create that loop in my athletes and then try to create speed and efficiency of that loop so that an athlete can make those adjustments and say, oh, I'm not in the right position. Oh, my knee isn't in the right position. Oh, my foot is in the right position. So now I can go ahead and make those adjustments to increase injury resistance or that commensurate prevention of an injury. So my humble beginnings really forced me, but it became a blessing in disguise. It allowed me to be creative, and it forced me to come up with a lot of protocols that once I did have access to some equipment, it became a pretty comprehensive system.
And so talk to us about your development or the concept of praxis. So I got it written down here as your test as a coach to see if your training and the tools you're implementing are working. The ultimate test is the field or the pool or the rink. So what is this concept of praxis, and how did you come to develop that?
Well, praxis really was, like I said, I wanted to figure out, this is a crazy story, but I remember I had a ballerina, and and we all know ballerinas have that toe out position, and she asked me, she goes, well, why are we doing internal rotation if I'm always toes out? And I didn't have an answer for her. I knew that we should work internal rotation. I knew that we should work external rotation, but I really didn't have an answer for her. And then I started to study and watch dance. I used to watch their amazing jumps and their bounds and their leaps and how extensive, how dynamic and ballistic it was. And then I started to cross-reference that with all of the knee problems that they were having. And that's where I started to develop what I called kinetic creativity in its relationship to praxis, and that is whatever it is that the world poses as a problem, and that's, can I jump really high and can I land without injuring myself, or can I block this defensive end that's trying to bull rush me, or can I dunk a ball on a 7-footer who's trying to block me? All of that was, how have I prepared my athlete to address those problems? one of the easiest ways that I've relayed this to the athlete is it's a biomechanical vocabulary. And if you are having a conversation with somebody, imagine losing the use of the letter A. And how effective could you communicate to somebody without sounding like an imbecile? Now, what if you were to lose the letter S? What if you were to lose another letter? And now all of a sudden, could you still converse with somebody? Absolutely. People do it all the time. But you don't sound fluid. You don't sound poetic. You don't sound smooth about your voice, and you're not eloquent. And so that is the way that I relate to my athletes is I want to give you a very robust command of a biomechanical vocabulary so that you can address any type of problem. And we do it all the time is hopefully they've increased their injury resistance and hopefully they've increased their performance. But one of the ways that we constantly test it is we throw new skills at them all the time. I'll literally, and this was getting some used to with my athletes here, is I will give instructions and they started to get frustrated with it, but then I told them, this is why I want you to do it. I want to see, put your hand here, do this, do a sideline plank, figure 4 to a get up, go. And then all of a sudden, I want to see how the athlete responds to that, because how they respond to it is corrective in nature. If somebody can't get into a deep squat, then they've got to figure a way to get up. And when you watch them move, movements don't lie. So as you sit there and somebody could say, yeah, I squat all the time. Oh, yeah? Well, let me see your Turkish get up. Let me see your figure 4 sideline get up. And next thing you know that there is a problem, or you know that, and we've always said this, John and I express this all the time. For me, everybody always asks me what the marker of a good athlete is. How do you know a good athlete is a good athlete? 2 things. They move well. And number 1, they move well. Number 2 is they can pick up on new skills really quickly because of that kinetic creativity, because of that practice and their ability to say, I can solve this really easy.
It goes back to that theory of athletic problem solving, that if movement is a language, and can you communicate better than anybody else? Can you get up and speak and write? And it's pretty interesting if you look at movement in terms of language. I mean, it really kind of gels. It's always funny when I always hear Raph, like Raph and I haven't really had a deep conversation like this in a while, and everything that comes out is so 100% on the observations of what we've done with our athletes and everything, and even my own training. So it's pretty interesting just to think about. Our great athletes, is there something inherent within them? Is it something developed at a young age? And, it all goes back to my theory of the best athletes in the world are the reason because they've had opportunity. That opportunity becomes, really the defining factor. I mean, and Rob, I'm sure you could agree with this. How many of the top swimmers, either had the opportunity to swim more because either their parents were swimmers, they had a local pool, or there was something unique within them. I mean, I'm sure there was nobody that was like, oh, I didn't learn to swim till high school, and I just happened to jump in the water, and I was really great.
Yeah, there's we've had one, and he was a pretty good athlete. He never really made it to the world-class level, but he was a pretty gifted athlete. I think he was either from Cincinnati or Ohio State, but he had a pretty nasty injury. Football, he was a tight end, so he's a big guy, and he was doing rehab in the pool, and it happened to be that the swim coach was there, and he was like, hey, you think you could, jump off these blocks and swim to the other end as fast as you can? And he actually did pretty well. But again, that goes back to presence. The fact that he was 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan allowed him to make that transition. But you're right, John. They're starting when they're our kids' age, and just riding that wave and figuring out if they can stick it through that mental block and get past the doldrums of it and eventually turn into a lifelong habit.
Well, I mean, I know I'm sure for Raider, I see all the pictures, but Jamie and Kelly, we have a pool, and just out of necessity, us having a pool, I had a swim coach come in that she works with them 1 day a week. And they could do all their strokes. They could swim across the pool. They could do everything at 3 years old. And now at 4, we went to a swim party, and all the other kids are kind of splashing around. A couple kids got like floaties on or like a vest, and the girls are literally doing like cannonballs off of the wall, swimming underneath, doing this stuff. And people are like, do your kids swim a lot? And I'm like, yeah, we have a fucking pool. What do you think? Like, what do you think? I wasn't going to harm them with the skills? Like, with that, I was going to have a pool and like let them fucking drown? And it's just,
they don't. Yeah, just
well, no, and I mean, people are like, you worried about your kids? I'm like, no, not at all. I'm like, they, I'm not, I don't go in and drink beer while they're out swimming in the pool, but like, if the pool's open, they are good enough to be able to, do some stuff. I mean, even when we were out on my brother's boat, the girls were kind of running around on the side. My dad was so nervous. He's like, what if they fall in? I'm like, well, good thing they can fucking swim, and I hope they do fall in and teach them a lesson. The only bad thing is I'm going to have to go in after them. But, no, I mean, it's Raph, and it's pretty interesting when I went back and just started talking with a lot of different, people that had, either developed athletes or were high-level athletes themselves. And the one thing that was universal was this idea of opportunity. The opportunity presents itself, and I always run into people, and I remember when people would ask me this question, I didn't really know how to answer it. Like, how do I make sure my kid's a good athlete? I want my kid to do this, and the analogy I give him is like, if for the same reason that, let's say you want your kid to speak Chinese, hoping that your kid speaks Chinese isn't going to teach them Chinese. You're going to have to get them a tutor. You're going to have to put them in an opportunity to learn Chinese. You're going to have to put them in some integration, and you might have to send them to China to truly learn the tonal differences in the language. And that's how they're going to learn to speak Chinese. 1 day a week of 20 minutes in class of Chinese class isn't going to speak Chinese. And the same thing with athletic movement and all these other different things. Like, and if you look back even at some of the development stuff, the idea of like, changing orientation where now, swimming, it's kind of weightless. And you made a great point about the idea that once you're in the water, every movement is resisted. And like there's no other environment really like that. The idea of like doing some form of sliding and like different movement stuff, and you start talking about balance. But I think that swimming stuff is so important for that orientation and really just that idea of resistance.
Yeah, it's really interesting. People ask us all the time, and we work with to change the culture. We know that we have to go to these young athletes. We have to start with them very young. And Cullen Jones, the first African-American gold medalist, is here. And he always talks about he drowned as a kid. He was 6 years old, and he was at a public pool, and he drowned. He went unconscious. They had to revive him, and his mom threw him into swim lessons. And it was really interesting that he talks about it, and I've heard the story numerous times and across the board with our other athletes that he said he wasn't even that good. He went all the way to college. He was good enough to get a scholarship at NC State, but he wasn't good. He wasn't on anybody's international radar. Antonio Tarver talks about it all the time when, there were 8 other boxers with him growing up, and he goes, he wasn't even in the top 2 or 3. He was the only one that stuck with it. And it wasn't until later in life where some of those other guys ended up in jail or dead. And, it turns out that, yeah, he is pretty good, but he really didn't blossom and mature. So our advice to these parents and people that say, hey, I want an elite level athlete are 2 things. Number one, like you said, they need a lot of help, but to stay the course. There's going to come a point in time. It was really interesting where we had one of the top guys from the Boy Scouts of America, and he said they try to push the kids to get their Eagle Scouts before puberty now because they know that once they hit that age, once they hit that 14, 15-year-old, if they're not really close, they'll give up on it just for a number of reasons, girls and, cars and sports and yada, yada, yada. So the Boy Scouts of America really try to encourage the kids to just start gobbling up all of those, those little merit badges as fast as possible so that they can get close enough so they see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's really interesting that, if they don't stay the course, then the other aspect that we tell our athletes all the time is if you want your kid or you want to be an elite level athlete, you got to accept being crazy. You have to accept that your kid is going to be crazy because there's things that the kid has to do that are not going to be within social norms. I mean, you look at a Michael Phelps and you think about what he's been through for somebody to accomplish winning 8 gold medals in one Olympics is an amazing feat, and nobody ever thinks of what it took, to get there, about everything that you gave up and everything leading to that point of developing an obsessive compulsive child, of developing a kid with ADD and channeling that ADD towards accomplishing certain athletic goals. So stay the course. Make sure that you get a lot of help with this kid if that's truly what the kid wants. Make sure they stay the course, and it's okay to be crazy. You actually want to encourage that, that little loco and cabeza craziness.
Well, yeah, no, Raph, you hit it on out of the park. I mean, every other person I talked to, actually, the biggest defining deal for high level athletes was actually late bloomers. That that kid like the JJ Watts or these other guys, like, hey, I was on nobody's radar. I was kind of a late bloomer. I was a walk on, and then all of a sudden I blossomed at some point. And I remember somebody asked me about it, and I was like, when I was 18 years old, I was 6'4", like 250 pounds. And when I went to college, I didn't own a razor, and I grew 2 inches and put on 50 pounds in college. And it was, and I remember my freshman roommate was like, hey, how come there's only like 2 razors in there? And I'm like, well, because I don't shave. And he's like, what do you mean you don't shave? I was like, well, I don't own a razor. I don't shave. And like he gave me this look because he had like a full beard and a chest of hair, and like he kind of like made fun of me about it. And then as I like proceeded to grow 2 inches and like get all bigger and stronger, I looked at him and I was like, well, that's what you get for fucking peaking at 14 years old, you fuck. Yeah, oh, dude, you were this size as a freshman in high school?
Yeah, just a little, yeah, basically.
But so, I mean, like that whole kind of late bloomer thing. I mean, if you look at a lot of high level athletes, it's that kind of like, hey, I was a late bloomer. I wanted to do this. I continue to work, and they almost develop the skills and the want, and then all of a sudden everything catches up. I wonder if things are too easy too early, if like that kind of ends up being a hindrance in some way.
You expect it to be easy or something.
Unless you're a female gymnast, and then if you haven't got a gold medal by 14, you're probably not going to have one.
But that want that you said, John, I think is an incredibly important point, because if you look at the college players, like Vince Young, classic example, the game came too easy for him, so all of a sudden everybody is an athlete as soon as he gets to the NFL, and he has to work, and he can't. He doesn't know how.
Well, the thing which is interesting in the NFL, and fucking dude, you heard you guys say this, and Raph can attest for having worked with so many of them, you have to have like an inherent kind of fight within you, and like it's like it's like the pit bulls I've had. I mean, like my one little dog, my new pup Vinny, he will literally battle with a rope until he physically cannot stand up. He will literally, like that fight within that dog, he will not give up, and he will literally, I mean, to the point where like I'm tired, and like you gotta like shake his arms, and I'll literally mess with him until he's so physically tired he has to lay down. Like that's the kind of fight, and I think for some people maybe it comes too early or whatever, but a guy like Vince Young, who is such a gifted athlete, never really had that fight within him, and then all of a sudden you get to the NFL, and that fight becomes so important. I mean, you look at a guy like Tom Brady, who always had that kind of fire within him, and all of a sudden gets his opportunity and is ready to go. I mean, not the most gifted athlete, but was so technical in other ways. So I think when you get to the NFL, you almost have to have, all of a sudden the playing field becomes level, and it becomes that, like, do I want it enough? I mean, I don't know if I ever told you guys, but I played against a guy that had all of his kids' faces tattooed on his arms. And I remember like looking and seeing all his kids' faces, and I asked him about it, and he goes, I look at these little motherfuckers before every play, and remember I got to feed them. And that was what was his fucking defining factor to go out there and beat wholesale ass, was the fact that he had like 6 fucking kids tattooed on his fucking arms. And I remember like looking and being like, those are all your kids? And he was like, yeah, I got a lot of fucking mouths to feed. And that dude was fucking pissed off about it. And I don't know if he was pissed off because he had a big paternity suit, or there were some hungry fucking kids, but that guy went out and played. And
like, ladies nagging him to get the
yeah, I mean, but like, people always ask me about it, and they were like, well, white middle class kid from Palos Verdes. I mean, how did you go? And I'm like, well, obviously you never met my mom, so so it comes in a lot clearer.
Doris really likes Raph, though, right?
She loves Raphael.
Yeah.
I love Doris.
Dude, my parents love Raphael. One of my favorite stories is when Raph would come visit. He would go hang out with my mom and dad, and not my girlfriend, and my girlfriend was all fucking butthurt. And I was like, well,
that's the story
because you were a fucking nightmare. Rob's like, yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with these little John's parents, Jessica.
So it's really interesting, and John, you give really good insight, and I laugh all the time when I have these young football players that want to go to the NFL, and they always ask me, what are the attributes that I really need to work on? And you end up just stealing their soul because I say, do you want the truth or do you want what you want to hear? And everybody wants to hear, oh, I ran a 40 and I did my bench press and blah, blah, blah. And I go, listen, we've been around the NFL long enough. You're not nasty enough. You don't have enough of an attitude to play at the next level. And it's something that nobody, they don't even talk about it. They're starting to. They talk about at the combine is, so-and-so has a nasty streak. That is like one of the biggest performance pluses that you can give an NFL, especially a lineman. It's like, it's got a nasty streak. And they won't say anything about your 5'10", 5 or your 40 or blah, blah, blah. But any coach that's within that's in the know says, wow, then we want this kid. It's just funny that you sitting there like, what's his vertical? What's John's vertical? What's his? Nobody really gives a shit. He's, the kid plays nasty.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting. Like, and this was a hard thing for me to really kind of tell people about the combine. Is like the combine really isn't anything other than a check mark. Like, I remember when I went to the combine, I ran 503 electronic. I had a 34-inch vert. I mean, I got fucked on the bench press and only got like 28 reps. But like, all these things, and I remember going through all these endless interviews, and I remember one of the coaches who came out to work with me, I was like, oh, I did pretty well. And he was like, kind of like shrugged his shoulders a little bit. And I was like, well, did I not do? He's like, no. He's like, you're exactly who we knew you to be. And I kind of was like, well, like, what do you mean? And he's like, dude, he goes, honestly, the combine, we have years of tape on you. He goes, when we go to the combine, we know exactly who you are. We've talked to your coaches. We've talked to everybody. We've seen you on film. The combine is our opportunity for us to see and for you to validate all of that stuff. Now, you can go in there and shit the bed, and then we know you're not the guy that we thought you were, or you can go in there and just be the exact same person we know. Yeah, we knew he was going to do about that, and we put a check mark that you are, you prepared for the test, you went out and trained, you did all the little things to prepare yourself for this big fucking job opportunity, and you're the person we knew you to be. Now, there's occasionally like the Mike Mamulas of the world who go out and just blow up the combine, and he's on, this kind of guy from Villanova, wasn't on everybody's radar, goes out and puts out this amazing deal, and some fucking coach or GM or head owner goes, oh, I want that guy, and then that guy gets picked first. But for the most part, most guys, it's really just like a check mark.
Validation.
And it's a validation. And I think like what happens is if there's all these, people out there that are like, oh, if I have, 30 reps at the bench press, then now, that'll be, no, dude. If you're a turd, 30 reps on the bench press or 40 reps on the bench press isn't going to all of a sudden unlabel you a turd. You're just a strong turd. And like that was what was really interesting, like having all of a sudden gone through that process and then been a player and seeing young guys come in. And I remember always being like, oh, and they're like, oh, we're going to get this new lineman. He got this at the combine. I'm like, oh, great. Oh, awesome. I fucking hope he does great. And then we come out and the first day of pads, he'd be out there trying to hit and have a great time. I'm like, yeah, no problem. That's great. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Because here's the thing, motherfucker. I'm going to keep this pace for 26 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
In 2 weeks, you're going to look like somebody shit on your face. And sure enough, about 2 weeks into training camp, all of a sudden you come in and they're moving slow and looking tired. At that point, I'd be like, oh, this is where I get my energy. Let's fight. And that's when I would fucking turn it up. And like, and even the guys that would come play hard in the beginning of the season, we were always like, dude, we got a fucking postseason ahead of us. Like, the NFL only is about what happens in November. And so I think like the difference between the young guys and really the veterans or the guys that even come in and play for a long time is that ability to sustain work over a great period of time. And that's really the difference between the guys. I mean, and it's really like that in any sport. I mean, you see a guy like Phelps who put in that volume of work and then steps away, all of a sudden rekindles his passion and probably goes back and will be fucking better than he was because now he has like focus and clarity, not just like, hey, this is what my life was. And that's fucking exciting to see that guy come back. Yeah,
I'm excited. It's kind of a lot of people hate him, but I absolutely, if you ever get a chance to read his book, it's an amazing thing because it talks about why are you still in it? And he said, yeah, I won 8 gold medals. He goes, but I didn't hit my targets. And he had certain performance variables that he wanted to swim at, and he missed those. And it's just amazing dealing with that caliber of athlete of how many of us would be happy with 1 gold medal. He hit 8 of those, but he still wasn't happy because even though he got a gold medal, he swam a 141 and not a 140 kind of issue. So it's a pretty amazing thing to get into that head.
Well, don't you also think for him that this has been his whole life, his identity, everything he's done, and he probably stepped away and realized like this is who I am, and like that's really the interesting thing, like with the NFL especially. I mean, you basically train your entire life for this specific job, and then all of a sudden, from the time you're 14, this is your whole life, and then all of a sudden, 20 years later, in your mid-30s, all of a sudden they're like, "No, you can't do your job anymore. Get the fuck out of here," and then you got to go do something else. That's why a lot of these guys have so many disorders and problems. You see a lot of these NFL guys having so many issues, is because they don't really know who they are, or how they identify or how they fit within the grand scheme outside of the game. And so you see a guy like Phelps, who probably even more so. I mean, the fact that these guys train their entire lives for one fucking moment. I mean, he probably stepped away and was like, man, when I was swimming, it made everything so much easier. I was focused. I knew exactly what I had to do, and and I want to do this forever, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, he got the passion and the love back, which is amazing. I just read that Charles Woodson wants to come back for another season.
Wow, that's got to be 18 years for him.
Oh my God!
But he's still performing. He's leading the league in interceptions.
That's crazy.
Didn't he get hurt? Didn't he tear his ACL or Achilles or something?
I'm not even sure.
I've been traveling for 6 weeks. I got to catch.
That could be Steve Smith. I know.
Yeah, Steve Smith hurt himself. But Charles Woodson, I think, did he win the Heisman in '98?
God, it was a long time ago, brother.
He's a year older than. He's been. And he came out early, so he's got to be up 17, 18 years.
God.
Which is a long time. I mean, you know what, though? But, I mean, Jerry Rice and those guys played that long. I mean, what did Tony play, like 17 years?
Yep. Jerry. Largent.
Yeah, Steve Largent. And then you got Clay Matthews and his brother Bruce. I mean, what did they play, 20-plus? He dislocated his shoulder.
Dislocated shoulder, Charles Woodson.
Yeah, I knew he got hurt. I saw that.
Man, when he was with Green Bay, I remember, like, the Packers first got him. They also got Al Harris.
What?
The dirty one.
Dude,
what?
They fucking dominated. Like, they played straight up man and fucking just smoked everybody.
Al Harris, he gave himself.
Al Harris is a bad motherfucker, man.
Al Harris, I played in Philly with. He gave himself the nickname of Moi. so that was his nickname, and like we just were like he'd be like, "You mean moi?" And he talked about himself as like, it was the fucking most hilarious thing. By far one of the craziest, most interesting, lockdown, solid motherfuckers you ever want to play with. Like I always think of like Tom Cable, who I played offensive line with, said the way that he was my coach. The way you pick your team is actually you go around and you pick the motherfuckers you want to go walk down a dark alley with to go fight some people. And Al Harris was one of those dudes that you'd be like, call Moi. Moi go show up anywhere, fucking beat some ass. I mean, dude, he's a fucking cool cat and a big ass fucking skinny corner, dude. I remember Al ended up. We were in training camp and he lost like a pound of fucking weight and went into like full body cramping, and so they had to give him an IV, but they couldn't get the IV in because his arm was fucking cramping so bad. And I remember they were like had him sitting there in a pair of shorts, and that motherfucker was so fucking lean you could see his fucking heart and like all of his muscles. And I was like, damn. And that dude didn't really train, drank Cokes, ate fucking McDonald's, and was still 4% body fat. So he's a cool cat. He was from Florida. And dude, they had some fucking players, dude. I mean, you think back on those type of guys. I mean, they were fucking lockdowns.
Now it's like the Packers can't win a game. They're around here they're calling it the Ditka curse. I don't know if you guys seen that commercial, but there's a commercial that was released where Mike Ditka was wearing a Packers sweater vest.
Yeah.
And since that commercial aired, Green Bay's lost every game. Dude, they're calling it the Ditka curse.
That is great.
That is great.
Danny, we got anything else? Raph, do you want to talk about anything else?
No, I'm good. I'm getting ready to saddle up with these sprinters. They're going to come in and lift. They are by far my favorite group to work with here. These guys will get after it. They know how to suffer a little bit.
Nice. Well, if there's anybody that knows how to fucking get them to suffer and, more importantly, apply the proper suffering, it's you, as Tex still has some PTSD from dealing with you. I just laugh about it.
Raph, you bring 45-pound plates in the pool with these?
We do. And, the funny thing is now at our other facility, we have it's a full dive well, so it's a 18-foot deep pool. And the guys are absolute fish. It's a completely different story. I mean, some of the guys will train with our candidates, our SEAL candidates, our MARSOC candidates, and they're just absolutely amazed that some of our guys can do a 3-4 minute breath hold where we're doing drown proofing, and I'll say drown proof for 6 minutes today, and a couple of my guys will come up for one breath in 6 minutes.
Jesus.
What's drown proofing? You used to call it just drowning when I was.
Yeah, Tex, you know it is drowning. They know it is drown proofing.
Drown proofing, correct.
Well, all right. Thanks, Raph, for taking the time, man. It's always great to catch up with you. We got to get you, I'm sure, again in a few months and see how everything's going.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on the Power Athlete Radio. It's always a blast.
No problem, amigo. Good to talk to you.
All right. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks a lot, Raph.
See you guys.
Bye.
Be careful, Tex.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. To learn more about the talented Raphael Ruiz, you can find him on the Axis Sword and Soul Facebook page, or see what he's up to by following him on Instagram under his name, train4_Axis. Keep your eyes peeled to see how the U.S. men's and women's Olympic swim team dominates in Rio in 2016. Until next time, bye!